Hello team, I'm Jeff Martin, Vice President of Waste Management Safety Services. In last month's Operator Science Series module, we discussed a topic that is critical to the long-term health of post-collection employees. That being the use of 3 points of contact during equipment interface. I want to take just a moment and review the high points of that presentation. When preparing to mount or dismount a piece of equipment, an employee must face towards the equipment. The employee's hands must be free of objects such as a clipboard, a walkie-talkie, a hard hat, or a coffee cup. As an employee maintains 3 points of contact while either climbing or climbing down a structure, only one extremity or limb should move at a time. For example, if an employee is lowering his or her left foot, both hands and the right foot should be in sustained contact with solid points on the equipment until the left foot is firmly in position. Once the left foot has been firmly placed, the employee can reposition a hand or the other foot in order to continue their climb up or down. With only one foot or one hand repositioning at any given point, an employee makes progress through a controlled movement where adequate attention is given to those areas of the equipment that will eventually accommodate the employee's weight. We also talked about the risk to ankles and knees when you leap from a piece of equipment. A jump to the ground from 4 or more feet can result in several hundred pounds of force to be managed by one or both of your legs. If you do this several times a day for several years, you expose yourself to the likelihood of serious ankle and knee problems as you continue to age. In fact, it could take several years for the damage you do today to your leg and joints to become a real issue. Using 3 points of contact every time you climb up or down a piece of equipment is essential to your continued health and mobility. Today's discussion once again focuses on operator interaction with the equipment he or she controls and the need to be continuously focused and aware of your surroundings. In this presentation, we will cover 2 important topics. First, each operator's responsibility to arrive at work fit for duty. And second, how focus affects an operator's response sequence in an emergency event. As we have previously stated in an earlier module, arriving for work in a suitable condition is a requirement for waste management employees. By accepting employment with Waste Management, you agree to a list of obligations. Among them is the willingness to be physically and mentally capable of completing your daily assigned tasks. Basic physical readiness can be achieved with discipline in 2 primary areas. First, get enough rest before arriving at work. This means spending an adequate amount of time in the rack. The idea that you can deny yourself sufficient sleep for a couple of days and then maybe catch up on that third day is something of a myth. A prolonged period of fatigue can have a debilitating effect on your health and your ability to reason. You alone know how much sleep you require. For most people, it is 8 to 10 hours a night. But you have to give your body and mind enough rest, and that starts with a good routine. Getting in bed at the same time each evening is step 1 in that process. Now for most people, 4 to 6 hours of sleep will eventually catch up to them, leaving them physically sluggish and mentally slower to react. Second, arrive at work unimpaired. This means showing up free of injury, debilitating illness, or any substance that may impair your ability to function physically and mentally. Make sure you are familiar with the potential side effects of medicine and warnings over how it might affect you mentally or physically. Arriving at work unimpaired also means showing up free of distractions and willing to concentrate fully on the task at hand and your workday. Now, I want to take a moment and discuss how a lack of mental readiness might impact your functional control of the equipment you operate. Operating a piece of heavy equipment is quite different than operating a motor vehicle. Though the control mechanisms are somewhat similar, the size, performance, and automation of heavy equipment requires an additional set of skills. Differences aside, There is one component of heavy equipment operation that is identical to vehicle operation. That is the presence of a human being. Though the hardware changes, human involvement will bring an established set of limitations and abilities. For example, the biomechanics of human performance mandate a specific course of action once a physical response is required. Whether you are driving a family car or operating an excavator, there will always be two types of involved operator response. Those responses are simple and complex. Let's consider these two separate classes of behavior. First, simple response, otherwise known as conditioned behavior. Conditioned behavior involves motor skill that is developed through repetition over many years. These are the instinctive motions that are adopted over time. We are not just talking about muscle memory, but actual changes or shortcuts in the way certain neurons in your brain will fire when asked to complete a task that is done hundreds of times throughout a day. Over time, that task gets physically easier and mentally easier to execute. In other words, they become reflexive and do not require a high level of thought to execute. Examples of conditioned behavior would include the use of an accelerator or the physical input at the steering mechanism. Your brain determines where you want a piece of heavy equipment to go, and your senses and limbs work together instinctively to actually make that happen. Responses to anticipated events are also conditioned. If you share space with another piece of equipment or another operator each day, you might learn to anticipate that operator's behavior, learning to direct your own equipment effortlessly. An onlooker might observe the working face or floor and be astonished by how the various pieces of equipment appear to move in unison, both complementing and avoiding one another with what appears to be ease. Though a landfill, MRF, or transfer station may appear from the outside to be a controlled environment, it actually is not. The working face changes constantly, and the addition of trash streams will modify subsequent activity of the equipment. The presence and behavior of customers is also an X factor that is sometimes hard to anticipate. The next class of behaviors, those that are complex, are essentially responses to unanticipated events in your work environment. For example, something totally outside the norm occurs, causing your brain to go through a series of steps to engineer a response. You have to visually detect the event, then you have to evaluate and determine what it means. Then you have to build a list of possible responses and, finally, choose a response and put it into motor action. A second type of complex response occurs in a completely different scenario. It is a complex response to what would normally be an anticipated event. This happens when a person is not focused and is caught off guard by an event that would normally be routine. Here is an example. A veteran dozer operator has been dealing with some challenges in his home life. His teenage son has always been a good student, but lately has started to struggle. In addition to the challenge of getting his son back on track, he and his wife have struggled financially after recent cutbacks at work left her unemployed. These struggles have started to weigh on the operator, and he has found it increasingly difficult to focus while at work. About midway through his workday, the operator finds himself somewhat distracted, thinking more about his domestic challenges than the operation of the 50-ton piece of metal he occupies. As he pushes trash, he draws near to a customer that is discharging a load. He is distracted and not watching for a helper that unwisely exits the cab of the truck. That helper has seen a desirable object in the trash and intends to violate the scavenging rule. In this scenario, were the operator anticipating the behavior of his customers, allowing that they may not follow waste management's rules, his response would be swift. Conditioned or simple responses will generally take half a second to implement. However, Since the operator is not focused, his mental and physical response will be complex and therefore slower. Complex behaviors take around 1.6 seconds to implement, 3 times longer than simple or conditioned responses. His lack of focus will allow the helper, who is jogging at 5 miles per hour, to cover an additional 10 feet before the operator can respond. This is the takeaway. The call to be mentally fit for duty involves a level of focus that is free of distraction. I know that you are a human being and that we each have lives outside of work. But if you climb behind the wheel of heavy equipment without sufficient focus, then your ability to respond to both anticipated and unanticipated events will be affected. Some operators make the mistake of believing that a person's ability to respond increases when the strength of the event increases. They believe that the presence of a small child in the path of their equipment would cause them to respond much faster than they would for a small animal. That is not the way the human mind works. In fact, extreme factors can actually cause a sensory overload, actually slowing or delaying a person's response sequence. The ability to respond will always be determined by mental readiness or focus. When our hauling drivers go out on the roadway each day to service customers, they do so with the knowledge that they will encounter numerous complex scenarios that require a calculated and complex response. Every day they enter an environment where they must share space with other drivers, non-professional drivers who may or may not behave logically as they fight for available pavement. In much the same way, equipment operators can expect to be challenged. Many of the situations they encounter on the working face or tipping floors will require something more than an instinctive response. Think of how many times you back as an equipment operator during each workday. The factors that limit vision and equipment mobility while backing will always require a higher level of operator focus in order to maintain the safest operation. You can't luck your way into consistent safe backing of heavy equipment. Distraction will easily lead to negative consequences. One thing I would like to add, when things do go wrong, it is critical that every affected employee feels they have the right or authority to call for a work stoppage, alerting other members of the team to the presence of extraordinary circumstances or conditions. Stop work authority is a matter that must be addressed by employees and managers. Employees must feel that they are free to call for a halt in operations when it is necessary to reduce the risk of an incident. Showing up fit for duty is more than challenging on some days than others. And I know we each have our own lives and face our own set of challenges. But my encouragement to you is simple. That equipment has no conscience. Meaning, it does not care about you or your teammates. You do yourself no favors by figuring out your domestic situations while perched atop a piece of heavy equipment. Give the equipment you operate and the working face the attention that it deserves. Safety failures cannot be taken back. There are no do-overs in a landfill, transfer station, or MRF. And once catastrophic injury or death occurs, it cannot be undone. In closing, I want to let you know about the upcoming 100 Days of Summer Safety program. This is a program we have utilized across waste management the last few years, and it offers a creative and fun way to really focus on safety improvements. Post-collections has always been included in the 100 Days competition for improvement, but this year we hope to make the program more visible for you, using the Operator Science Series to highlight key areas of focus during the 3-month event. Our theme this year will be the prevention of personal injury, and I hope you and your teammates will get excited and get involved in this year's competition. The program kicks off at the end of June and will run until September. At the end of the competition, Waste Management will identify the top performers across the company, celebrating those local and market area teams that go above and beyond in their focus on safety and safety performance. I can give you solid advice on where to start. The teams that really shine will always take a look at their own previous year's performance and set goals to exceed it. Work with your managers and identify the areas where improvement is needed at your site. Then engage everyone on your team to build a plan to focus on and celebrate safety progress. Internal competitions were a key area of last year's focus and fun. Whether challenging teammates to join them in going injury-free or to be able to recite the disposal operations critical 8 rules, make sure every member of your team has an opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to improve. On a special note today, as we've ended the month of March, I want to thank all the post-collection employees and managers for a great first quarter. Your efforts, January, February, and March, provided a much safer working environment. As you know, we've put a lot of focus into our life-critical rules and our operating rules around our post-collection facilities to safeguard our employees and our customers while on our property. I've asked you and I've challenged you all to take it personally, to own your sites. We've reduced our injuries, and most importantly, we've saved lives. As we get ready for the summer, I want to thank you, but also ask for your continued engagement in protecting one another and our customers we serve. Keep up the good work. And as always, thank you for your commitment to continued improvement and safety. And please remember to stay 100% focused 100% of the time.